Happy Thursday morning, everybody. I'm Matt Scalici, joined by Ben Flanagan, and we are here as we are every Thursday, or most Thursdays anyway, with Bammers, our show where we explore all things Alabama fan culture, Alabama football fandom, every aspect of it. And today, everybody's focused on what's going on this weekend in the world of Alabama sports. A-Day is this weekend. It's the first time for a lot of fans that they'll have a chance to get back into Bryant-Denny Stadium since, well over a year ago. So it's an important weekend for a lot of fans for a lot of reasons. The reason we're going to be talking about in a few minutes here today is because there's an ongoing quarterback battle. There is an intense battle. Obviously, there is a leader right now, but a battle to determine who's going to be Alabama's next starting quarterback. And we want to take a look back and talk about some of the people who've claimed that title before, and maybe the guys that we think of as the best quarterbacks of the Nick Saban era. But before we dig into that, Ben, I want to talk about what I mentioned before here about A-Day and the significance of that. I mean, this is, again, like I said, they're letting in a much bigger crowd than at any point that we saw for home games last season. So this is going to be kind of a homecoming a little bit for many Alabama fans.
Yeah, I mean, they're having A-Day, first of all, which they didn't have in 2020 for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's going to be 50% capacity. They're charging this year for tickets, which they haven't done, I don't think, in my lifetime. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's going to be $5 per person. So that's a big change. But again, for obvious reasons. So it's going to be different. But the fact that A-Day is back, I think, is going to make a lot of people happy. I think more than anything, Matt, the story around town and the story of college football and maybe America is that there's a brand new elephant statue on campus in Tuscaloosa. The 7-ton, 19-foot tall elephant statue named Tuska. Our colleague Michael Casagrande has been doing a lot of reporting about this new statue that was brought in earlier this week, relocated from North River Yacht Club, where it stood or sat for part of 20 years. I think it was there since 2000 and is now on campus at UA. So they had everything, all these national championships, statues of all the coaches, statues of some players on the steps of Bryant-Denny Stadium. All that was missing was a giant elephant statue. And I think now our Bama life is complete, Matt.
It's gonna transform the procession into the stadium. You're gonna have a whole lot of people wanting to go and visit the elephant, go perhaps revere this elephant. Ben, if it becomes, I mean, look, Alabama's had a pretty good streak of luck here in recent years, but you have to think that a lot of people are going to start attributing supernatural phenomenon to this elephant statue, good or bad, whatever happens this season. It's because of that elephant.
Look, Matt, I think that if Alabama never wins another national championship or game, honestly, the fact that we have this statue now, I think it really seals the deal. I think, again, like, it completes me, I think, as an Alabama fan. So yeah. I'm just happy it's there. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be swarmed by fans this weekend for A-Day. UA really expedited the process of landscaping and construction to make sure that it would be ready for this Saturday. I was out there twice this week to get some video and photos, and there was a large crew out there really working hard to make sure that fans would have access to it, what they're calling Tuska Plaza, which is going to be the name of the statue site. So that'll be there and ready for you to feast your eyes on this Saturday. So it's going to be selfie city, that's for sure.
Well, I'm excited for everybody who's getting a chance to go on Saturday and go and see the team, the statue, everything, just sort of get some semblance of what it's going to be like to have a game day in Tuscaloosa again. And, I do think there's going to be a lot of eyes on the quarterback position. I think everybody obviously at this point feels like Bryce Young is the guy that is the leader in the clubhouse, but you never know. And a lot of people are going to be keeping their eyes on him. Ben, some of the people we're going to talk about on our list today, as we go through our rankings for the top QBs of the Saban era, some of these guys weren't necessarily the lock starter coming out of A-Day in the years that they started. So let's go ahead and get into this. And before we do, I just want to remind everybody, if you're not a regular viewer of our Bammers show, we try to get you guys involved in the discussion. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook Live right now, drop your opinions in to the comments, and you'll see them pop up on screen. Like this one right here, who says Mac Jones or Tua, and I think we're definitely going to hear both of those names today at some point. But let's go ahead and get into our rankings, Ben. Who do you have as your top 5 right now? And we'll start.
Well, let me just say first that neither Mac Jones nor Tua Tagovailoa will be on this top 5 quarterback list of the Saban era. They don't belong, and I'll break it all down for you real quick.
Nobody's buying it.
It's pretty clear that's not true. So, Matt, let me first of all say I've never played quarterback, never played football, so I technically know nothing about how the position is really played and appreciated. But we're speaking as fans here, right? In terms of fans who follow the game and watch it, love it. And so we're talking about favorite quarterbacks of the Saban era. And let me make that clear. This is the Saban era. Like, I know Kenny Stabler and Joe Namath are great. And if this was all-time Alabama quarterbacks, they'd certainly be considered and probably on the list too. We're focusing on the Saban era. And during that period, there have been a lot of amazing quarterbacks. So I'm going to start with number 5, Matt. And I'm going to go with Blake Sims. And I feel like there were no expectations for Blake Sims when he became quarterback. Like, nobody had any idea what he would bring to the position. I think a lot of the fans thought the quarterback room was pretty depleted once A.J. McCarron graduated and left, played his final season at Alabama. And Saban sort of had to resort to recruiting a transfer in Jake Coker from Florida State, and then also this fifth year senior who was originally a running back and really had no meaningful experience at the position. So I think it's fair to say that fans were pretty skeptical about Sims going into the 2014 season, and really about the 2014 season in general, especially the way the 2013 season ended, which we've covered here plenty of times. But I think you add Lane Kiffin in his first season as offensive coordinator to the mix, and this would be his first of 3 straight seasons working with a first-year starting quarterback, and Sims really flourished. He was obviously the right guy for the job. You mentioned quarterback battles going into the season. Nobody knew, would it be Jake Coker, this highly touted prospect out of Florida State? A lot of people thought that he would automatically just walk into the job, and it became a real battle. Sims didn't let that happen. And Sims, again, he flourished. He was the right choice. He set a single season record for passing yards with nearly 3,500. Nobody saw that coming. He threw for 28 touchdowns, just shy of A.J. McCarron's single season record. He threw for 400 yards against Florida, had incredible games against Auburn and Missouri in the SEC championship game. He was a big reason that Amari Cooper was seen as the best player in the country in the eyes of many, and why he was a Heisman finalist. Sims was just a gamer, Matt. Like, I really wish we could have seen more than just one season from him under center. And it's wild that he did most of it with his arm too. Like, the guy was a great runner, really shifty. He could have done even more with his legs. I think he's somebody who would really flourish in this modern era of the RPO as it is right now. And he just gave Alabama some really amazing opportunities, escaping the pocket, scrambling for first down runs, most notably against LSU in that overtime win during the 2013 season. And the guy was just a really positive presence on the team too. I mean, I think a lot of people remember what he looked like on the sideline when A.J. McCarron led that comeback when he was just a backup. This guy was just a great teammate, clearly somebody who has since shown a lot of love to the Alabama program and the teams that have played since he left. So Blake Sims, an underrated quarterback of the Saban era, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as BJS, one of our commenters, points out, he learned the position late. So he did all of those things he did. He put up incredible stats that, honestly, as you mentioned, Ben, were unheard of at Alabama at the time. I mean, I know we're sort of used to seeing that 3,500 type passing yard in a season, but 28 touchdowns. I mean, these were numbers that did not happen at Alabama, even under Nick Saban, even when they're winning national championships. So the fact that this was a guy who sort of converted and had to develop into the position in a relatively short period of time really is part of what makes him special. I think, as you brought up also, he was a big personality. The teammates loved him. He was a guy that even before he was the starter, he was a big presence on the bench. I can remember seeing him in that 2012 LSU game when I think he was a freshman at that point, where when Alabama scored the go-ahead touchdown, Blake Sims got right in front of the camera on national TV and did a memorable move, let's say, celebration.
Yeah, I think he was a fan of the DX faction in WWE, Matt.
Yes, I think so.
People should search the gift to see for themselves.
Yeah, but I mean, Blake Sims is still, I think, one of the most beloved of these Alabama former quarterbacks, and a lot of it does have to do with his personality. But he had some great games. I mean, you mentioned that Florida game that year. Texas A&M, I remember him just absolutely throttling. I think it was a 59-0 game that year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was kind of a year that Alabama exploded offensively in the way that we are now used to seeing them. But Blake Sims was part of the year that really started that trend for Alabama.
Yeah, and he was just shy of a national championship appearance too. Obviously, we talked about the disappointing loss of the Ohio State game, but not his best game certainly, but he was a big reason Alabama got there. He just had he had a great arm. He had great instincts. I mean, we mentioned that Florida game when he's just throwing bombs to Kenyon Drake and Amari Cooper in that game, and just a really fun player to watch and somebody I think people have a lot of affection for.
All right, we're getting lots of participation in the comments, which we appreciate. That run versus Texas A&M is a top 5 juke of the Saban era. So go look that one up too while we're talking about it. But
yeah, Vern Lundquist with a good call on that one too.
Yeah, awesome.
If you can believe it, Alabama fans.
Yeah. So let's Ben, let's move into number 4 on your list.
So this is where it gets really confusing for me personally. I was confused making this list. And so at number 4, Matt, I had Jake Coker, the guy who took over for Blake Sims. And the reason I would give him the edge, I think on paper, was just that he put Alabama over the edge. He won a national championship. But I think the argument that a lot of people would make was that team had an amazing defense and it had Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry was the focal point of that offense, which was obviously very balanced. There were really great offensive players other than Derrick Henry on there. Obviously, Calvin Ridley or Darius Stewart, O.J. Howard, who went off in that national title game against Clemson, where Jake Coker just found him wide open. Maybe people would say that anybody could have thrown it to O.J. Howard for those long touchdown passes. But Coker, again, I use that term gamer earlier about Blake Sims. I mean, the guy was tough as nails. He's somebody who was named the starter going into the season, but then lost the job for one game against Ole Miss. And then I think Cooper Bateman started for him in that game, but he came over and nearly led Alabama back into it. And then from that point on, he was the guy. I think the Georgia game is when he won a lot of people over, when Alabama dominated. But Matt, I originally had Coker, and he belongs on this list in my opinion, but I don't think I can in good conscience leave Jalen Hurts off of a Saban era quarterback list. The guy he gave so much to the program, sacrificed so much his junior season, obviously, went through a lot, and is just one of the most inspiring sports stories in recent memory. So it's like, how could you leave him off? It seems wrong. I mean, he was a 2-year starter, developing on the job. Again, to go back to fan expectations and maybe media expectations, I think they were a bit unfair, especially when he was a true freshman thrown into the mix right out of high school. We talked about those quarterback battles. He didn't even start that first game that season. I think Blake Barnett started, correct me if I'm wrong, yep. But Jalen Hurts came in on his first snap as the Alabama quarterback. He fumbled the ball away to USC, but regrouped, found our Darius Stewart for some touchdown passes, and then he became the guy at that point. And he can, I think there would be wrinkles, obviously, but he beat you in so many different ways. He's somebody who was developing as a passer as his career went on, and obviously flourished by the time he got to Oklahoma into an excellent passer. But he could beat you with his legs. It didn't really matter. Matt, you and I were in Atlanta for the 2017 national title game and then the 2018 SEC championship game. And it's cliche to say this now, but you really can't write what happened. And I think that SEC championship performance is just like the stuff of legend, doesn't even do it justice in terms of what we saw Jalen Hurts do in that game. It was an inspiring effort. Just in terms of the narrative and the story, I mean, I think books will be written about his career and about that game in particular. So again, hard to leave Jalen Hurts off of it. I'm sure it hurt, and I'm sure it still hurts what happened in terms of the way the 2017 game ended, where he struggled in the first half against Georgia. Tua comes in and gets all the glory, right? Where Jalen Hurts had led Alabama all season long to that national championship opportunity. So in some ways, I think he doesn't get the credit he probably deserves. Was under the microscope, struggled at times here and there. But, I mean, I look back at that Clemson national championship loss, and Jalen Hurts scampers for that late touchdown with less than a minute to go, and he is just a few seconds away from glory. He's a Clemson stop away from being a national champion as a true freshman, and then we're talking about Jalen Hurts in an entirely different way. So Jalen Hurts belongs on this list.
For sure. And, Johnny pointing out here, I was asking the group earlier if any of these Saban era QBs have won a national title as a true freshman. They haven't, but Jalen came extremely close. And I mean, I think you're going to hear some people say Tua as an answer to that, but Tua, you have to remember, was not the starter in that 2017 national title game. And he also didn't lead the team to that game over the course of an entire season. And I think Saban has always gone to great effort to point out that they don't get to that national title game. They don't get to the position they're in without Jalen Hurts. He did all the heavy lifting that season, and they needed Tua to come in and change the way that game was going in that moment. And I think over time, Jalen Hurts has been looked at differently than he was, right in the immediacy of his career at Alabama. I think people have started to look back, and it's not so simple as he couldn't get the job done, so somebody else had to do it. I mean, Jalen was a player who, firstly, had a starting job, an incredibly complicated starting job thrust on him as a true freshman, which very few other players have ever been in that position. At a program of that size. And, I think he very clearly did develop over time, as we saw. I mean, I think he was a completely different player by the time we saw him at Oklahoma, and even the year before, his final year at Alabama. I think he looked like a better player that year. But, he also faced other things like a constantly shifting offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. This dude dealt with a lot of stuff. And I think in probably any program other than Alabama, this dude is kind of an all-time legend. But there's no question he was an incredibly talented player at Alabama. They won a ton of games because of him, including some games where he wasn't the starter. So I think he has to be on a list when you're talking about the most important quarterbacks of the Saban era. I think he definitely belongs on this list.
Yeah, and now he's presumably the starter for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
So again, the story just continues. It's amazing how these things have unfolded, but he's proven a lot of people wrong. Maybe people would say, how big of an underdog could you really be if you're recruited by Alabama to be a quarterback and you're the starter, et cetera. But I think if you were paying close attention, you really know how the story went. And to see him where he is now, it's just been amazing to watch. Yeah,
and for sure, I would say the comeback victory against Georgia in the SEC championship, the 2018 season, is one of the greatest moments, I think, that we've seen of the Saban era, for sure, at Alabama. I mean, it's just so great, and I mean, the drama of the game aside, just so cool to see that happen for that player in that moment. I mean, there's very few things that I have seen personally covering sports that took me out of my job that I was doing in that moment and made me just kind of stand back and say, man, what an incredible thing that just happened.
Yeah, it's like, I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Like, that's really how it felt in the moment, like in person. Like, and I'm sure so many other fans were there, probably felt the same way, but just a heroic effort. And again, it just established him as an Alabama and college football legend, considering that he went to Oklahoma, became a Heisman finalist, and went to the college football playoff. The guy played in the college football playoff all 4 years of his career in college football. So, I mean, there are just fewer, more accomplished individual players in college football. So good on Jalen.
Cool. All right, let's get to the top three, Ben. It's contentious. I'm seeing a lot of debate in the comments about the top three. We all know who the three guys are, I think, but it's the order that you're getting a lot of debate about.
Yeah. So at number 3, Matt, I've got Tua Tagovailoa, and I wonder, is this controversial? Like, I think Tua is probably an easy number 1 for a lot, if not most Alabama fans right now. Certainly, I mean, that first season where he was a full-time starter was just unbelievable. And then again, he basically did it again after Alabama fell short, went back for round 2 as the full-time starter and just annihilated everything in his path. Really, both of those seasons. I mean, he was unstoppable. I think he's a guy that if you could pick one quarterback from the Saban era that you would want to start to win one game, I bet a lot of people would probably pick Tua. And I mean, the fact that his legend was born the way it was, to come in and play one half of a national championship game after playing really no meaningful snaps prior to that, it's just, again, the stuff you can't write. And everybody just knew the legend of Tua was born that night, and for good reason. He became an instant national championship and instant national champion. And so it's hard to argue. And again, I mean, the way the offense was clicking, the way he was leading it and executing it, and he obviously had a lot of weapons with those wide receivers and the running backs too. I mean, Alabama was just a force of nature, but Tua was the guy, and he was just somebody who seemed unstoppable at the position. And he obviously fell short those next 2 seasons, got hurt. Injuries were a big part of his career at Alabama. He didn't seem right after the SEC championship game where he got hurt again, and didn't seem right against Clemson. But Clemson was just a buzzsaw, and they just dominated Alabama. I think that may have happened regardless, but just an amazing player to watch, to see him process the field the way that he did as soon as the ball was snapped. Amazing pocket presence and decision-making. The poster child, I think, of the RPO era in a lot of ways, and somebody who just flourished under Mike Locksley and then Steve Sarkisian. Just an amazing player to watch. And to put him at number 3, it seems wrong, but I'll try to make a case here soon.
Yeah, I think you, when you're doing this ranking, right, it's some of it is talent and ability and how they looked when they were at their best, but that's not, I think, what everybody feels. That it's not what tells the whole story. I think results have to factor into it, and sometimes results don't 100% depend on talent and execution. Sometimes you need some good luck. And I'm not talking about the way the ball bounces. I mean, sometimes you have to, staying healthy can be a matter of, did this Mississippi State player, roll left or roll right when he got you on the ground? And I think there are lots of players in college football history who have a lot of what ifs about how the rest of their career could go. I think even though there is some disappointment about the fact that Tua was not able to win national titles again after that freshman season, there are many players whose story end in a less fortunate way than Tua's has, where he is now the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. So I think it's all worked out for him, and he's still very widely regarded as an incredibly productive player, won a ton of games for Alabama. But I think the reason we're talking about him at number 3 here largely is because he, even as big as his potential was, it felt like some things got left on the table.
Yeah, but I mean, in a lot of ways, numbers don't lie. I mean, career passing touchdowns, 87. That's outrageous.
That's crazy.
He had 43 in one season. In one game, he had 6 touchdowns against Ole Miss. But I believe 5 of those went to Devontae Smith. But yeah, I think what I'll remember about Tua is how easy he made it look. I mean, it just seemed like the game moved slower for him, and he found these incredible teammates of his just whenever he wanted to. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with scheme, and it has everything to do with the talent of his teammates, the offensive line, the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs. Everybody is a team game, obviously, but Tua was special, and everybody knew it. Nick Saban obviously knew it when he had to make that difficult decision to start him over Jalen, who had been a 2-year starter, but there was good reason to do it. Tua was, like you said, had some bad luck, and there will be a big what if asterisk, I guess, next to his name forever. But he seems healthy now. He's the starter for the Miami Dolphins, and I think everybody at Alabama wishes him nothing but the best, and they want to see him succeed.
For sure. All right, Ben. Top two. We gotta see how this rolls out. Everybody's gonna know the result once you tell us who your number 2 is.
Well, you said results earlier, right?
Yeah.
So number 2, A.J. McCarron is my number 2. I mean, he's just a winner. He still holds the career passing yards mark with 9,019, a record that really may never be broken. He started 3 seasons, obviously, won 2 national championships, nearly a third straight, if not for the kick 6. He was a Heisman finalist in 2013, incredibly efficient. I think he had one season where he went 30 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, just a guy who didn't turn the ball over and just got you results and was a winner. And he's another guy I think a lot of people, or that caught a lot of people off guard, especially in 2011 when he was the clear heir apparent to Greg McElroy, but there wasn't much flashy about his game, at least in the eyes of Alabama fans. I don't think he was seen as another game manager, but he developed as a passer as his career went on, with Alabama really dependent on his arm his final 2 seasons. But even if you go back and look at that 2011 national championship game against LSU, and he's hitting Kevin Norwood over the Honey Badger, Matthew, and then his clutch game against LSU in 2012, we talked about earlier, where once again he links up with Norwood on like 3 or 4 straight first downs within like the final minute of the game, before the Yeldon screen pass, obviously, that won it. I think about the 2013 season when he torched Texas A&M on the road in this just amazing quarterback duel with Johnny Manziel. I think about the 99-yard touchdown bomb to Amari Cooper that put Alabama up in the Iron Bowl before the dreaded kick 6 happened that prevented him from winning a 3rd straight national championship. But Matt, look, I mean, he's just always going to be remembered as one of the great winners in program history. I mean, to be the leader of a dynasty that was just shy of a 3-peat, it's really hard to rank him any lower than number 2.
Yeah, and we talked about quarterback battles kind of having a surprising result sometimes. You think you know what's going in. I mean, as much as we all look at A.J. McCarron now as this sort of guy who had an incredibly successful career at Alabama, multiple national championships, like you said, was probably not necessarily looked at as a guy who was going to accomplish all that much coming in. I'm looking at a headline right now from 2011, written by our now news director, Izzy Gould. And the headline is Alabama's quarterback battle between A.J. McCarron and Phillip Sims officially begins. Mm-hmm. So there was a period of time where, we didn't even know if A.J. was going to beat out Phillip Sims for the starting quarterback job at Alabama.
Yeah, but I guess sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I think it was pretty clear, by the time Alabama won that national title game in 2011, I think that A.J. had a long career ahead of him. But even throughout that season, I mean, that Alabama offense did not inspire a ton of confidence his first year as the starter. I think we really saw him grow into what he became in 2012.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I said clear heir apparent to Greg McElroy, and that's probably unfair. That's not giving enough credit to the stakes of that quarterback battle going into the 2011 season. I mean, a lot of people thought Phillip Sims might really be the guy. So you're exactly right. I mean, he was a major recruit going into that season. And so A.J. McCarron had to win the job. And once he did, he flew from there for sure. But, I think something that Saban always talks about is like competitive character. I think A.J. McCarron was clearly one of the most competitive players in Alabama history. And you're right, the offense was really built around Trent Richardson in 2011. They were a run-heavy offense. They had some balance. They did score a lot of points, not compared to what they do now, but it was obviously different eras. And look, A.J. McCarron had to make the throws. There were some very good wide receivers and guys like Kevin Norwood and Marquise Mays and some really talented players, but it was really run first. That was the run the dang ball era certainly of Nick Saban's time at Alabama. But once he won that first national championship and proved that he was the guy, he could be a quarterback that could win. Again, they started passing a lot more with guys like Kenny, with players like Kenny Britt and these other guys that were just so amazing to watch. So really fun to watch.
For sure. All right, Ben, we're up to our number one now. And I'm judging on how I've seen people ranking QBs in our comments. I think this is actually going to be a vaguely controversial pick, but let's get to it.
I said Kenny Britt. I meant Kenny Bell.
Kenny Bell.
That's the
Kenny Bell was,
yeah, my apologies for that.
No. Kenny Bell, by the way, another day we need to go back and talk about players we forgot about. But Kenny Bell was the original Henry Ruggs III. I'm putting that label on him in the Saban era.
Great,
just a speed demon.
Yeah, great deep threat. I think was he the guy who caught the flea flicker pass against Auburn, I think, in an Iron Bowl game. Yeah, had a good game against Texas A&M in 2013. My apologies to Kenny Bell. He was fantastic and a great weapon for A.J. McCarron in those offenses. Okay, so we're at number one here. If it's not A.J. McCarron, who is it? It's got to be Mac Jones, Matt. It's got to be. I mean, call it recency bias, call it stat dependent, but I just don't know how Mac Jones isn't the best. I think there are good arguments for A.J. and Tua as the top guy because they were so productive in multiple seasons. They each won national championships. But Mac Jones, if you want to say it's in a vacuum, whatever, I just think, like, if we talk about, like, if you want to make the body of work argument, then okay, we've got AJ and Tua, and we can debate that. We can go toe to toe. But I mean, it just doesn't get any better just as a college football quarterback than what Mac Jones did in 2020. Like, and also, Matt, like, the argument that I hear everybody make against Mac Jones is, well, he had all these weapons. He had all these weapons at Alabama, and he's not going to have that in the NFL, et cetera. But honestly, I think this is actually an edge that he might even have over Tua. I mean, look at who all Tua had, right? Like, he has Ruggs, Judy, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. He has them all at once, and plus Josh Jacobs, Damian Harris, and Najee Harris. So, I mean, Tua had a lot of weapons too. I mean, not to mention in that national championship game where he came in, there were like 7 NFL players on the NFL receivers in that game that he could throw to. Mac Jones certainly had great weapons. Obviously, the eventual Heisman winner and Devontae Smith being chief among them. He had Jalen Waddle for a few games, and then he lost him for the entire season. So John Mechie has to step up in Jalen Waddle's place, or Slade Bolden has to step up. He had Najee Harris, obviously, but I just think he technically had fewer quote-unquote weapons than even Tua had. And he was able to do perhaps even more, be even more efficient. Everybody says the same thing about Mac Jones if you compare it to Joe Burrow and all the weapons he had too, but Joe Burrow is still considered the greatest quarterback of all time, or at least had the greatest single season of all time. But in terms of every metric there is, Mac Jones did one better. And played an entire season against only SEC teams, and then dominant Power 5 teams in Notre Dame and Ohio State. So, I mean, again, the numbers, the games, the results, they all speak for themselves. And look, Matt, he's also about to become the highest drafted quarterback in Alabama history. So he set every record there was to set, or at least a lot of them that are very important. And he only had one season to do it. So, I just don't know how I don't know how you don't say Mac Jones right now after that season. Again, call it recency bias, but it's hard to argue against it, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you said, if you're trying to judge based on one season, and we often do that where we say if you have one game to do it, if you have one season, we have one season with Mac Jones, and that's and he has no errors in that one season for us to judge by. Obviously, he did start a few games the previous year when Tua was out with injury, but I don't know that you can really knock him all that much. I mean, I would say the worst game of Mac Jones's college career was an Iron Bowl where he still scored a ton of points and threw for a ton of yards, and he had a couple of very weird turnovers in that game in a season when I think Alabama's defense was a lot better this past season than it was in 2019. But yeah, I mean, as some people are pointing out, he also had 4 years to learn the system. And I do think, and we talked about Jalen Hurts earlier, I think they sort of represent opposite ends of the spectrum a little bit, in that Jalen got thrown into the action right away, and it does affect you a little bit. I think when you get put out there before you really had a chance to develop and prepare, you end up developing some habits that the coaching staff just kind of has to live with and say, this is who we are. Let's roll with it. Mac was fully formed by his coaching staff, I think, before he really ever had to set foot on the field. And that was a huge advantage for him and for the entire offense he played with. I think I'm sure there are people who are going to point out, as we get ready for this NFL draft and the debate is ongoing, about Mac's athleticism. And I'm not going to sit here and say I think Mac Jones is an elite athlete, but the quarterback position is unique in that it's a position where you can dominate a game without having to be an Olympic level athlete. And Mac Jones, I think, in ways that many other quarterbacks even have not, he's so fast at recognizing defenses. And I mean, the ball came out of Mac Jones's hands so quickly and so accurately that it really doesn't even matter if he's mobile or not. Obviously he needed protection, and I think he'll need that in the NFL too. But I mean, I go back, there's a play from the Iron Bowl that to me really typifies Mac Jones. And, Auburn had sort of set a blitz where the guy came really straight through the gap and untouched and was coming right at Mac Jones. And the ball comes out of his hand as he's basically falling over, and it hits Devontae Smith perfectly in stride as he's like coming off a fake block, essentially. I mean, the amount of things that are happening on a play like that are intentional, it doesn't match up with how fast it all happens. It seems it's happening so fast it seems like an accident, but it's not when you slow it down and really look at it. And I think that's really ultimately what Mac Jones' sort of defining trait is that made him such a great quarterback, is the speed that his brain works at playing football is just I think it's something rare and something we really have not seen in any of these other players we've talked about.
Yeah, we hear all about his preparation, right? Like he's the most prepared quarterback in the draft, I think is like what a lot of people say, probably including him. But I go back to that whole thing of like, it's just one season to judge him on. Tua did it, 2 years, won a national championship in his third. AJ McCarron obviously did it in 3 seasons. But it's like, okay, well, look, I get that. And if you have AJ McCarron and Tua as your number one quarterback at Alabama under Saban, or even overall, fine with me. Like, that's not wrong. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, if that's the knock against Mac, then Derrick Henry can't be the greatest running back of all time at Alabama, right? Because Derrick Henry had one season as the guy, and he took advantage of it, and he set records and was the Heisman winner and clearly the best running back in the country. And according to you and me, Matt, and basically everybody else, the best running back in Alabama history. That's based right off that one season, which also was a national championship winning season. So some parallels there, I think, with Mac and what he was able to do at the position. And maybe it has everything to do with scheme. Maybe it has everything to do with Devontae Smith. But I mean, everything that you talked about, the way he could process things, his preparation, his quick release. It all came together in historic fashion. Again, look at the numbers. The guy was incredible. Look at the film. Just watch the games, and you'll see what Mac Jones was able to do in one season. It was, again, amazing to watch. That's the word I keep using to describe all these players. All amazing players. I just think if we're just looking at what they did in these games, what they accomplished, Mac Jones right now, for me, gets the top spot.
And one of our commenters on YouTube, Scott Tidwell, says, please do the same with best running backs. We actually did do that a few weeks ago, Scott. So check the channel, check the videos from the channel where you're watching this right now, and you can scroll back and see the video we did on the best running backs where we ranked them all from Alabama. So
You're going to like number one, Scott. I promise you.
You are going to like it. Yeah. Well, listen, so much.
What do you think, Matt? Who's number one? Who's your number one?
I'm very hesitant to pick the guy that we just watched to be number one that fast, but it's hard for me to argue against it, Ben. I mean, I feel like he so much of what Alabama football does is about striving for perfection, and that's really, really hard to do. A lot of times it's completely unrealistic and unattainable. But Mac Jones did it this year. He had a perfect season at Alabama. And it's again, there's lots of good arguments that I've seen in here of people saying he couldn't have done it without what came before. Tua changed the game. These are all good points. I think if I'm judging by kind of how Alabama fans hold the standard Alabama fans hold their own teams and their own program to, which is basically perfection. Nobody else did it like Mac Jones did. I mean, the only other person that's had an undefeated season at Alabama under Saban is Greg McElroy. And we're not talking about Greg on this list today. All due respect to Greg, but I think we all know that Greg was an okay part of the 2009 national championship team. He was not. I wouldn't say that he was the engine that drove that car that year. Mac Jones, I just don't think this team does what it does without Mac Jones. Would it have been able to do it with another guy that we've talked about today? Perhaps. But Mac Jones was the guy on the spot when all the other pieces were there and the circumstances were right. And he did his part. He came through and he played a perfect season for Alabama. And I think that's going to go down in the books forever. I think other guys that we talk about are going to end up being rated really high at their positions because they were a part of this perfect 2020 season.
Yeah, flawless victory, I think, is another word for it.
Flawless victory.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, Ole Miss got the life bar down pretty far there, but
yeah, but it wasn't because of Mac Jones. He hit that one of his best games. So
yeah, wasn't that a game where Alabama gained literally every yard that it could have gained in the game? I think they were like 10 yards shy of that, but
I don't know that they ever got stopped in that game. I mean, no. I would have to go back and look, but it wasn't much.
Yeah, not a lot of punting during 2020.
No.
So you can attribute that to Mac Jones and all those other guys. I mean, Alabama's offense was just a machine, a Terminator. It wasn't just him. He would be the guy to tell you that. They had a Heisman winner on the same team that played a different position. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's a tough list to make. It's a tough pick. But that's what it is to date, Matt. Okay?
Well, and I would say this too. Our judging by our comment activity today, this is one that people have really strong feelings about and different feelings about. I would say this is by far the most active I've seen our comment section since we've started doing our Bammers show, which we do every Thursday. I love the discussion. I love the arguments being made. Lots of people making good points today. And also, I'll just give a quick shout out to say, I appreciate that you guys are being very respectful of each other in this discussion, as much passion as there is. So props to you guys for that. Join us here next Thursday. We're going to do this the whole off season and maybe longer if you guys are into it. Every Thursday morning, where we're going to come here and we're going to talk about stuff that Alabama fans care about. So I'm glad to see everybody jumping in here today, and hopefully we'll see you guys all back next week. Ben, thanks as always for being here with me and ranking Bama stuff.
Thank you, Matt, and everybody have a great, safe A-Day weekend.
That's right.